Okay, so now that we have the project created, we've got the game mode base blueprint created. We have the Paladin mesh in there, and we have an idle animation. But the problem we have is that we have to eject to be able to see our player. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add a spring arm and a camera. So let's go into the Paladin character header file. We'll go into Paladin character header file. Now I cleaned up the code a little bit. As you can see, I moved the tick in the set of player input component. There was another public section down at the bottom. I just went on ahead and moved it up to the other public section. So you can do that if you want. You don't have to. I just do that just to clean it up a little bit. So we need to add our declarations. And what we need is we need to do a class u spring arm component and a u camera component. So now that we have declared the classes, what we need to do is we need to go down and we need to add them into a private section. Now the private section is not created, so we have to create that, which is not a problem. So let's just go ahead and create the private section. Go down here below protected, we'll just type in private. And what we need to do is add a spring arm component. This is going to be a U property. Now we need to have it visible anywhere. Blueprint read only. I only want it to be read. So category, we're going to put this into a category of camera. That's going to be in the details section. And then we have to have a meta equals and then a allow private access equals true. And we are going to need a use spring arm component. We need to create a pointer to that and just call this spring arm component. Now that we have a spring arm component, we need to do a follow camera. So we'll just say follow camera component. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, come down here, paste that, and come up here, type in U camera component. We're going to have a pointer to that. We're just going to say follow camera component. Okay, so we should be all set in the header file. Now we need to go over to the Paladin character CPP file. So inside here, we're going to have to add two header files. Now most of the time when you are adding this stuff, and we're going to need to add the spring arm and camera and the constructor. The constructor is right up here, a Paladin character. And let's see, create camera, boom. And then it's going to be a spring arm component. We're going to create default sub object. It's going to be a U spring arm component. And when you type that, as you can see up top, it added the game framework spring arm component. Now Writer does this pretty well. and I'm sure Visual Studio Code will add the includes for you. If not, make sure that you add this include. And then we'll just go over to text and say camera, boom. And then we need to do a spring arm component. And we need to set up attachment. We're going to set it up to the root component. And we're just going to put some settings in here. We're going to say target arm length, I believe, is going to be 400.f. So that's 400 units away from the character. And we need to do a spring arm component. And what we need to do is a use pawn control rotation. That is going to be set to true because we want the spring arm to rotate with the character. Now what we need to do is say create a follow camera. So a follow camera component, we need to create the default subobject. That's going to be the uCamera component, and make sure that header is there, the header up top, the game framework spring arm component, and the camera directory with the camera component header. And we're just going to call this follow camera. Now we need to set up, the camera needs to be attached to something. So what we are going to attach it to is the spring arm. We need to set up attachment, and we need to set up to the spring arm component. That's be the user spring arm component, and it's going to be socket name. Okay, but what we need to do is make sure that the follow camera be use pawn control rotation. We need to make sure that is set to false. We don't want the camera to rotate. We want the spring arm to rotate with the player. So now that all of that is set up, we go ahead and save the file. And let's go ahead and fire up the editor. I have the font text set to 18. Let me know if that is good for people so that text is easy to see. It's kind of big on my screen, but let me know if the text is good for everyone. I know it's kind of big on my screen, but that is what we need to do, because I usually have it set to like 13 or 14, but that's kind of small for someone to see on YouTube. Okay, so let's go to Content Browser, and we want to open up the Paladin character blueprint, and you want to open up full blueprint editor. And in the event graph, I just removed the tick in the begin. We don't need that. So if we go to the transform area down here, there's some settings we need to do. And what I wanted to do is set that to 30 and set this to 100. So what that does, it kind of sets it off to the right a little bit, and then it moves it up. So let's go ahead and compile and save. Now we can go to the test map, and if you click play, now you see your character. Now if you try to move around, you're not going to be able to move. That's because we need to program that in. And if we come back here, inside the code, we set the target arm length to 400. You can set that to 200 if you want, but I just set it to 400. And then we want to come in here, and if you say rotation, you see how with the spring arm we did use pawn control rotation. That is set to true. Now if we go to follow camera, use pawn control rotation is set to false, because we want the spring arm to rotate. Now in the code, if we look back here, we did spring arm component, create default sub-object, set up attachment. It's set up to the root component, which is this right here, the Paladin character right here, the blueprint. And the create follow camera, we have set up attachment to the spring arm component. And then what that does is that it puts the follow camera right here underneath the spring arm component. It attaches it. So that's how we set up a spring arm and a camera in C++. It's kind of simple. So let's move on to the next video. We are going to be attaching a shield and sword to our player. That's it. Bye for now.